All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It is Tuesday, and you know what that means. Time to do a little bit of the Tao and see where we go there. And then also we'll be diving into some bonus material from the wisdom of Dr. David R. Hawkins that I found looking at it last week, entitled The Most Valuable Qualities for a Spiritual Seeker. So that should be fascinating. But hope everybody's doing fantastic, and it's a beautiful day here, and hope it is wherever you are, ladies and gentlemen. And this should be interesting because last week's Tao, unexpectedly, when we just chose a random verse out of nowhere, was very, very profound. And the timing of it was unique for me and even a couple people in the comments, which I always find fascinating. And so I am very interested to see where we will go today. Hope you got yourself a beverage or a comfy chair, and we are there. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, last time we were looking at the section entitled, it was the 20th verse of the Tao Te Ching, entitled Living Without Striving. This time, let's choose another random verse and see what little bit we get before we dive into advice for a spiritual seeker. Maybe we'll look at the Living from Greatness is the 25th verse. Trust in your own greatness and look for beliefs that contradict your status as a being of greatness. Wayne says, catch yourself in the midst of any utterance that reflects your belief that you are just average. Silently speak warmly to that belief and ask what it wants. It may think it has to protect you from disappointment or pain, as it probably did earlier in your existence, but with continued accepting attention, the feeling will always eventually admit that it wants to feel great. Now, this is deep, but he continues, so let it. You're good enough to withstand the passing disappointments and pain that afflict life on this planet. But trying to protect yourself by believing that you don't embody greatness is overkill and not the right way to go. And we must see ourselves as divine beings. And, that goes back to loving yourself and not in a way that some people might take it as that being, something ego-based. But you can't give something that you don't have. So if you don't have love or happiness or, any one of these things inside of you, then you can't give it to somebody else. And so that was a random lesson there from the 25th verse of the Tao Te Ching that Wayne Dyer was extrapolating on. Let's do the 27th verse of the Tao Te Ching. It begins by saying, a knower of the truth travels without leaving a trace, speaks without causing harm, gives without keeping an account. The door he shuts, though having no lock, cannot be opened, and the knot he ties, though using no cord, cannot be undone. Be wise and help all beings impartially, abandoning none. Waste no opportunities. This is called following the light. What is a good man but a bad man's teacher? What is a bad man but a good man's job? If the teacher is not respected and the student is not cared for, confusion will arise. However clever one is, this is the great secret. This is the great secret. And the ending of that verse there is what stands out to me today as the most powerful there. That if the teacher is not respected, while at the same time the student not cared for, and this being a much greater metaphor for life, in whatever way you want to take that for your own self, confusion will arise. Whatever form of confusion that may take in the world or in our own personal lives. However clever one or we or anyone is, this is the great secret. And that is very profound and very powerful. And so, for just a moment, Wayne says, he called this living by your inner light. This idea of traveling without leaving a trace, and speaking and not causing harm, and giving, this is most important, without keeping an account, because this can lead to so much negativity, personal pain, or anger, resentment, the kind of things that we want to avoid. And so when you give things to people and you keep an account in your mind like you're a bank, or even, simple things, like simple actions, not even giving them things, but, helping or doing things like this, and we begin keeping accounts on people like they owe us back. And this can be very poisonous, metaphorically, for our minds and our hearts, our spirit. It can weigh on you. I like the metaphor that Wayne uses when he used to speak. Rest in peace, Wayne Dyer. And he would reference a snake bite. He said, you don't die from a snake bite. It's like, what do you mean? And he says, you die from the venom that continues coursing through your body. And so these things in our lives that may cause us anger or frustration or resentment or even hatred in the most extreme cases, or you know what I'm saying. These things, if we do not move on from them, let go of them, there's better ways to describe that. But if we do not get the venom out of our body, then that is what will ultimately, metaphorically, psychologically, and spiritually kill us. It's not the event or the snake bite, but it is the thing that we keep inside of us, whether it is the anger or the hatred or whatever that be. I don't know why I felt to go on that tangent, but hopefully you're getting value. And let's see what Wayne here has to say. He says, for just a moment, imagine your most valuable possessions, including a large cachet of money, and on your table in your bedroom, in full view of anyone who might come in. Now, further imagine that your pile of precious jewelry, cash, important documents is completely safe. There's no need for insurance, and no one could ever possibly steal your treasure. Is this state of complete trust possible? He says, I think so, especially since it's encouraged in this 27th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, the door, and this was the line that was so deep it could be taken many, many ways, but Wayne says here, quote, the door, though having no lock, cannot be opened. The, quote, knower of truth that in the beginning was described travels without leaving a trace, speaks without causing harm. This knower of truth lives by an inner light. This illumination shines on the fact that stealing isn't the way of truth, or as described, the way of the Tao, or of God, or of harmony with reality. See, to me, this goes back to lucky people. or the science of lucky people, as I like to describe it, but where there just seems to be these people that are in the right place at the right time, and everything just seems to work out for them. And it's like, how are they? And I think, although some may be doing it on accident, there is actually a science to this, and it is through this spiritual alignment process. And if you don't want to call it spiritual, then that's just fine. Universal or natural alignment process with reality and the fundamentals of that. But I'll stop tangenting there. I digress. As one used to say, this illumination shines on the fact that stealing isn't the way of truth in this process of alignment that is also becoming, as described, living by an inner light, or as some would say, a Tao-centered life, or a God-filled life, or these kind of things. But sometimes when you use those terms, it gets too fluffy for some people, and that's just fine. So use your own descriptions. Once again, remember the names are not its name. The names are not its name, because the Tao is all names. Lao Tzu advises you to give without keeping an account or expecting something in return, for this is the nature of the Tao. Think of the sun that constantly gives the energy and the light and the warmth and, you know, all these processes we see in nature and in the universe, in reality, that it displays this kind of philosophy here. And so, once again, Lao Tzu advises that we give without keeping an account or expecting something in return, for this is the nature, you can say, of the Tao or of just reality. And when we can do this, then we are in alignment. We are of the Tao, as Wayne puts it. Giving, he continues, quote, is synonymous with receiving when you live by this illumination. Trust the inner light to guide you, for it is your heritage. Your origin is more from the Tao than from parents, culture, or country. It is more from this inherent universal nature of God, if you want to call it that, or of reality that we all have, that is our heritage and our origin from this source. Some people like to call God source. This is deep, powerful. I always love these because it takes my mind a different direction every time. I don't remember this video is, or this verse is another video in this series, probably from a year ago, and it makes me wonder what I was saying back then. But hopefully you're getting value from Wayne Dyer, if not myself, ladies and gentlemen, and Lao Tzu. And so Lao Tzu, Wayne continues, advises us to be wise and help all beings impartially, abandoning none. And that was the line from the verse. He says, you don't need anyone else's rules in order to reach out to others. Giving of yourself becomes your natural response because you're following the quote unquote inner light of the Tao, or however you want to describe that. You, in giving, and this process of then abundance. See, this is the most fascinating thing. When you begin to live in this abundant, like I have enough, and there is enough, and it is just fine, and it will come in time. And so there's another verse that said something like giving and earning little, and it just, you don't have to make a lot Because when you have this, I'll stop my tangent there. You know where I was going, though. There is this kind of weird alignment that when you stop continuing telling yourself, I don't have enough, there isn't enough, I have to hoard everything and give nothing away, this leads to a scarcity in your life, weirdly. And that would come from the strangest secret from Earl Nightingale and many, many others that speak about the same subject, is that what you think about expands. And I think the simplest explanation for that is because what you think about eventually becomes what you're focused on, and that's all that you can act on. And so you begin to create that in your life, whether it's on purpose or subconsciously. But the opposite of that, being abundance, would be a far greater quality of experience. And really, the only reason we're here, if you're new to the channel, thank you for being here. We're here to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through greater awareness and understanding of the nature of reality, so that we can increase the quality of our experience in life, whether that be through psychology, spirituality, mysticism, and many other things. Philosophy, also one of the top there. So, trust in yourself, ladies and gentlemen. Trust in yourself. And so Wayne says, develop an inner code of conduct that's based exclusively on your irreversible connection to nature, to God, to the Tao, as it describes here. When you trust this wisdom that created you, that which is beating our hearts and breathing our lungs while I'm subconsciously, I'm talking and reading and we're doing whatever we're doing. But whatever is our source, like the Tao is described, or like Lao Tzu described the Tao, it is doing nothing, but leaves nothing undone. And so even blinking your eyes is something almost always you do without even thinking about. But if you want to say that's just the physical body and this is all explained by physical sciences, that's just fine. I mean, everybody's open to their own opinion, but I think that leaves a lot of room open for a lack of... Anyways, trust in yourself, ladies and gentlemen, and develop an inner code of conduct that's based exclusively on our irreversible connection to the Tao. When we trust in this wisdom that created us and that created all the beauty of nature and reality that we see, then we, at the same time, are trusting ourselves. Know that nothing could ever dissuade you from your internal code of honesty and live by this standard. If you encounter an easy opportunity to cheat, perhaps because you've been handed too much change by a hurried cashier, he says, make the decision to be down to the penny honest. Interesting, because that's, one of them scenarios where usually you're just like, it's not a big deal, extra 10 cents or something. Furthermore, Wayne says, have faith in yourself to go on a trip with a minimal amount of planning. See, it's funny because that's kind of how I am anyways, but a lot of people, have to have a strict... So he's be spontaneous here. I'll go back a little bit. He says it's also important that you live more spontaneously. You don't need to neatly wrap up each detail of your life. That can be stressful and overwhelming and give us the great weight. And so understand this, and you can travel without being attached to a plan that covers every possible scenario. Your inner light is more trustworthy, or the Tao, or just your intuition, your gut sense, your gut feeling, which is funny. If you've never looked into that, there's a gut-brain connection, and that actually is interesting. I wonder if the saying trusting your gut came before the science of that. But anyways, that's off the subject. But that's what we're describing here. Go with the flow, ladies and gentlemen. I added that. I go back to what Wayne's saying here. Quote, your inner light is more trustworthy than any guidebook, and it will point you in the direction that's most beneficial to you and everyone you encounter. Now, I'll add, disclaimer, don't take this the wrong way. This is spiritual philosophy. So don't be like, okay, my spiritual guide is telling me to walk out into the freeway. This is not a good idea. The metaphor was tie up your horses and then, we can do meditation. But if we are just so blissed out that we don't do that, then when we come out of meditation, we don't have horses. They all ran away or something like that. I loved that old metaphor, but so don't be dangerous and unwise. This is spiritual philosophy, but also when you develop, Wayne continues, a trust in this force, in yourself, in the Tao, you'll change the way that you look at life. And that's a very serious, profound statement. When you develop a trust in that which created us, the intelligence or the whatever you want to call it. Let's go back over here to this other side. He said, when you trust in this wisdom that created you, you're trusting yourself. And so when you develop this trust with with creation and yourself being a part of that, remember, if God is universal, the Tao, then there is nowhere that it is not. So that means that it is in you and me and the plants and the trees and everything we see, including the tables and the chairs and the rocks and the minerals. Anyways, when we can trust in that and create a connection and alignment to it, this is when things will really change for us, and we will ultimately not only change the way that we look at life, but we will change the quality. Once again, coming from Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao by Dr. Wayne W. Dyer, for purposes of teaching and commentary and expanding the mind. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, was fascinating. Finally, we'll finish right here. Allow yourself to trust in the energy of the Tao to guide you, rather than relying upon some kind of arranged or fixed plans by someone else. And don't judge yourself or others. And that is a whole different topic. But the great Sufi poet, our favorite here, Hafiz, speaks of this in his poem about not judging yourself. He says, at some point, your relationship with God will become like this. Next time you meet him in the forest or on a crowded city street, there won't be any more leaving. That is, God will climb into your pocket and you will simply just take yourself along. Hafiz is always hilarious. You can see he thought a different way. And we'll leave that there, ladies and gentlemen. That was once again a tribute and a salute back to the 27th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Did not expect to go there. So we now switch over. Thank you for being here. If you are here, I appreciate each and every one of you joining me in the premieres and in the chat. And it's just wonderful. I hope everybody's getting value. We're going to dive into the bonus material of the wisdom of Dr. David R. Hawkins. And this is classic teachings on spiritual truth and enlightenment. And we were looking at calibrating the consciousness of mankind. But now we're going to skip all the way to the bonus material, because we can always go back and do this stuff again. And by the time we get back here, it'll be fresh for us to discover again. Unless we have like perfect memories, but definitely not me. And another disclaimer, I'm no master, or, I'm not a master of any of this. I'm just here learning and sharing my thoughts. I would ramble about this stuff anyways, probably to myself. No, not really. But if someone else was sitting here, I would love to have this kind of conversation. So I'm like, why not record it? And so this is why I've been doing this channel for a couple of years. So hopefully you get value. Bonus material, the most valuable qualities for a spiritual seeker. I haven't read this, so let's see what we discover. In this special bonus chapter, we share one of the latest lectures that Dr. David Hawkins delivered. One of the last lectures, which focuses on the most valuable qualities for a spiritual seeker. We start with the certainty, knowing. And we've read about certainty and knowing in many of the videos, many of the videos that we've done in the past. And so, certainty and knowing. I mean, think to yourself for a moment, what does that really mean? Because that's a huge subject, creating within yourself a certainty and a strong knowing. Just know that if you are spiritually oriented, the book continues, you will make progress. Start, therefore, with a feeling of security instead of insecurity or self-doubt that I'll add so many lead their entire lives feeling and can never release that insecurity and once again trust yourself and love yourself and know that you are connected and that you are divine, and remove this self-doubt and this insecurity. And know, the book continues, that anybody who wants to evolve spiritually will receive the necessary assistance. The old quote, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I'll add, the teacher is not always the teacher, but it can be many things. And so, success on this process is guaranteed. I'll add, the timeline, however, is not. Gotta have a little levity. But it continues, get rid of self-doubt. Any idea that you're not worth it, or that you're not capable of it, or that it's not the right time in your life. It's always the right time in your life, which some people would argue, and that's fine. We all have our own opinions, but it's always the right time in your life, except without reservation that you are worthy of the quest. Be resolved to totally surrender to the truth about God, about the Tao, the universe, reality, or as the Hermetics describes it, Atum. But remember, the name is not the name, because it is all names. Get rid of self-doubt and any idea that you're not worth it or that you're not capable of it. And so be resolved and surrender to the truth about God and trust that your spiritual evolution is aligned with God's will for you. So always start with a feeling of security instead of self-doubt. The living proof of God's love and will for you is the gift of your own existence. See, I want to cut in here. When terms or statements like God's love are used, it can very easily be taken like, oh yeah, God that I am separate from is giving me love, not the right way. Just remember, once again, we are not separate from this universal force that is all of creation, continually. Like maybe you could think of it as a life energy or an energy field that is continually functioning all of reality. And so when it describes it like the living proof of God's love and will for you is the gift of your own existence, I think what is being described there is that the proof of the caretaking of you existing within God in reality, that being God's love. So the trust that reality will give you what you need. There's many, but will take care of you. So often we want so much, but usually have what we need. That can also be debated. So that's perfectly fine. But and God's will for us, remember, not separate. So our karma or destiny or path that we are going down. So this universal protection and the path that we have for us in our lives is the gift of our very own life itself, existence. The living proof of God's love and will for you is the gift of your own existence. The very fact that we are here. Just think of the time. You don't have to think about it. It is right here. It is right now. The fact that we are is the best evidence that there is of quote unquote God's love and will for us. Here, now, are some other valuable qualities for a spiritual seeker, but I would suggest that we think deeper about this certainty and this knowing of a connection to something that we are all a part of that is much greater than any individual thing, and there is actually a oneness in this reality of duality, ladies and gentlemen. Here are the other valuable qualities for a spiritual seeker. We'll go through a couple of these, and then we'll do more of them next week and see where we end up. But do not compare yourself with others simply. But in this case, if you are a spiritual seeker, do not compare yourself with others. And then even further regarding holiness or merit, or, I call this spiritual materialism, where you're like, yeah, I meditated 50 times. And, it's like you're accumulating spiritual points. It's defeating the purpose. However, do not compare yourself to others regarding holiness, merit, goodness, deservingness, sinlessness. And so what others are is irrelevant to your own spiritual journey because they're on their own path. They may not even be on the entrance ramp to your path, or they may be way down the highway and you're still merging. Regardless, in this metaphor, if you're worried about what all the other cars are doing, you're probably going to crash, metaphorically, or not be very effective in your process. And so do not compare yourselves to others, because what others are, or what they're doing, or what status or holiness or merit or sinlessness or whatever that be is irrelevant to your process. What's important is what you are. I'm paraphrasing. I'm going from my thoughts back to the sentence from the book. So I'm going back and forth if you're wondering, because this first little bit here is actually just a paragraph there. What's important is what you are and where you are and what it is that you are trying to attempt to do. And so realize these are all human notions that we have about being better. And God, the Tao, the universe, is not limited by this silly thing that we seem to think reality is so based on, as our silly human notions of good and bad, and this should be that way, and these people shouldn't do that stuff because we think we know the way the universe should be, because you know what I mean? It's like we get way on a high horse down here and we forget that these are just notions that we're coming up with. And this force, this reality that we're in, is not limited to whether something is good or bad. It just is. This goes to Buddhist philosophy, actually. Things just are. And our opinion of it is what gives us a lot of suffering. And so, especially when it comes to disasters and tragedies, so many people get sucked into terrible things going on in the world, and they get very into this continual process of, oh, look at how terrible this is, and isn't that bad, and oh my goodness. And imagine the feelings that you, and the chemicals and the, you know, the stuff that is going on in your body while you're feeling all these emotions. That's probably not good for you, and it's not a wonderful experience anyways to be thinking of. And there is, you know, it's like this reality is outside of whether a tragedy or a natural disaster or anything is good or bad. That's not to say from our viewpoint here in duality that it is, you know, sad. But for those of us that are spiritual seekers and are trying to change the way that we think about life, change our thoughts and change our life so we can enjoy it a bit more and have more happiness and have more peace and joy and all of these things, then we need to begin to take into consideration, when we see these kind of events and things, this much larger viewpoint that God, all these human notions that we have about these things are just that, and that reality is not limited to these notions. So if we are trusting in this divine intelligence, in this spiritual process, then we must understand that if we were unattached from our duality perspective and we zoomed out of time and space and seen the whole continuum of history forever, then we would see that more often than not, these kind of bad things that happen that we see in time and space as terrible tragedies and events actually end up causing innovation and, you know, safety things in the future, and, you know, positive change, hopefully. But that's the way I like to think about it, and it gives much more peace when living in this wild world of duality, or of the physical realm as it's described, separate from the spiritual realm in Hermetics. So we'll do one or two more. We'll see how long I ramble on the next one. That one, though, was do not compare yourself with others regarding spirituality and the process. And so accept, number two here, that the concept of, quote unquote, the fear of God is ignorance. Because God, first of all, we're connected to all of it, and we are it, and it is us. God is peace and love and nothing else. There are lots of people who talk about the fear of God and use God as a threat. And we've talked about that and mentioned that a lot, especially in the history. In the history, going to the city of Alexandria, and gosh. So it's been 2,000 years for us to come back to this process of escaping a fear and guilt control matrix, as one great man put it, and unindoctrinating ourselves and coming to a place to where we know that God is peace and love, and we are a part of it, and it is creation. and that it is not separate from us, and that we do not have to fear it, and it is not a threat to us, because we have that certainty that we talked about earlier. Funny how everything's linking up in this video. We have that certainty we were talking about earlier, and that God is nothing. The book continues, God is nothing but love and peace and nothing else. People think that they're being punished by God, and that is not the case. What they're being punished by, yes, and he uses the word, is their lack of alignment with divinity, with reality, with nature, with universal law. Boom, ladies and gentlemen. And realize finally that the depiction of God as some kind of judge is a delusion. I'm loving this bit. An ego fixation arising out of guilt. Once again, fear and guilt, control. Problem, reaction, solution. It's funny how all of that works out. But this idea that God is a judge and that we should fear God, it's an ego fixation arising out of guilt. It was a brilliant plan to keep us from discovering the wisdom of the ages and coming to be enlightened men and women on this planet, so that we can take control of our lives and create a better reality for ourselves instead of being controlled by the system that we find ourselves in today. But that's not to say that we should shut down the system, because that won't solve the problems. We need a tide that will raise all boats. Or those of us that are here in this video are reading Hawkins or reading the Hermetics or Wayne Dyer or any of these other amazing things, Dr. Joe Dispenza, you could go down the list into ancient spiritual texts and on and on. But those of us that are raising our consciousness, and David Hawkins did prove in his research that once a certain number of people reach a high enough level of consciousness, we will have a critical mass or a phase transition or a 100th monkey scenario where there will be an evolution of consciousness, so to speak. But to try to describe that would be way too fluffy. And we might be getting in the clouds already, ladies and gentlemen. But that's what I like to think about, because I like to think back through the Yuga cycles and the great year and the previous golden age, and how we're heading back around that way. And we've come out of the dark times, and things are getting better faster than we can possibly imagine, even the most optimistic of us. Now, with that being said, let's finish. Realize that God is not a parent. And this idea of God is also not a judge. We should not fear it. What God becomes in most people's mind is this kind of parent who rewards you and loves you if you're good, and if you do a good job, and punishes you if you're bad. And that's nothing but a parent. Realize, it says, that God is something much greater than that we are all a part of. And now, we'll leave it there, ladies and gentlemen. That was fantastic. In the future, we'll look at realizing that salvation and enlightenment are somewhat different goals. What's the difference between this idea of salvation and this idea of enlightenment? And then clarifying that it's not personal. It is not a personal you who is seeking enlightenment, but rather a quality of consciousness itself that is the motivator. Wow, deep, deep subjects. I look forward to that, ladies and gentlemen. I look forward to that, and that is a boom to knowledge and a boom to wisdom. The wisdom of the ages. And Dr. David R. Hawkins and Dr. Wayne W. Dyer and Lao Tzu, and quality stuff, ladies and gentlemen. I love going through this kind of stuff, and I hope you do too. And I hope you got value out of it. That was fantastic. I'm going to be thinking about this for like the next 3 hours, and because that tied together all of the really important philosophies of this spiritual quest that if you're here joining me, especially this late in the video on this channel, then you are also on. And we are part of a percentage that used to be the 1%ers, but it is growing, ladies and gentlemen. It is growing. But that could be a ridiculous statement. You could say everybody's been spiritual since the dawn of time. So I don't know. It's whatever you think. Cheers. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I love and appreciate each and every one of you for spending time here with me. And remember to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through greater awareness and understanding of the nature of reality and our lives and our world. And also remember to seek to achieve and understand the lost wisdom of the ages and even the wisdom of today. And also the mysteries of our history. I used to have that down so good. I can't do it. I always trail off now, but remember that there is no way to happiness because happiness is the way. And if we can bring happiness to life rather than trying to find it out here, then the entire journey, all the things we've been telling ourselves, oh, hopefully when I get this thing or have that, or I'm this kind of person, all that becomes irrelevant because then we are there. And hopefully the entire journey is wonderful, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Thank you so much once again for being here. Be sure to expand the description below and check out the link to my Etsy shop. I think that painting should be on there. And as well, a link to both of the books we just went through. And there should also be one to C60 Purple Power, the most powerful antioxidant known to man. Give yourself the gift of health, ladies and gentlemen. And until next time, be the change that you want to see. Be the example that you want to set. No, 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 no.